quick. Hello! Welcome to the show. We are live. Another week, another story to talk about. But before we get to that, Matt's here. We're going to break down some news. We'll take your questions. You may be here because of the news. You may not even know what's going on, and you're just here for the Udemy Q&A. That's all great. We're going to do all that. But real quick, just so you know, tomorrow is the last day to sign up for my new course. We are starting next week on Monday. It's going to be 2 weeks of 90 minutes every other day. If you haven't heard about it, I've been talking about it for months, and I'm working nonstop to add more and more content. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I've been having one-on-one Zooms with everybody that's joining, learning what their setup is, how we're going to actually use these tools to help them in their projects, in their organization, and we're going to make some hopefully real change with people in their projects in the next 2 weeks. So I can't wait. I will probably have a hard time sleeping Sunday night. I'm so excited. So enough of that about that. If you're interested in that, you can go to my website. I will throw the link in chat. You can sign up. If you're interested in these topics, and you aren't able to join now, go ahead and go to the website. There may be a button. Yeah, there's a button down here that allows you to sign up to get on the wait list for future cohorts, so you can get an email from me whenever I launch another one, because these are live and I do them all in real time. So you might have to wait for the schedule later this year or whatever. So if you're interested about that, it's low spam. My emails are sometimes spammy. Just a few notifications telling you that there's new cohorts coming up. So anyway, enough about that. I've been talking about that for months, but I'm super excited, as you can tell. All right, on the show we got Matt back. Hello.
Hello. Hey.
All right, so Matt Williams is my regular co-host now, and he is in Toronto. We're getting to watch his co-working background there, and I get to pretend like I work in an office too.
That's right.
I live vicariously through you. So, all right, let's get to it, because I feel like there's a bunch of things we want to break down, and then we're going to take hopefully some questions from people. Hopefully, I have the answers. I suspect I'm going to have a lot of I don't knows. Matt and I talked before the show. I've been up most of the night. Actually, I've been up most of the last 2 nights, not related to this, but it is now a factor to try to find a lot of this information. I got up early this morning to work on this Docker news that I got in my inbox yesterday, which looked like this. It's hard to read. Essentially, it says, Docker is sunsetting the free team organizations. Basically, anyone who's created an organization in Docker Hub that's not paying for it. Free team organizations are a legacy subscription tier that no longer exists. And essentially, if you own a legacy free team organization, access to paid features, including private repositories, will be suspended on April 14th. Please upgrade your subscription before April 14th to continue accessing your organization. If you don't upgrade to a paid subscription, Docker will retain your org details and data for 30 days, and then it will be deleted. And then there's an FAQ, which we're going to get into. And that confusion, by the way, I got multiples of these emails because they don't actually mention the org that they're talking about. So I got multiple ones for the orgs that I'm in, because I'm in 7 different organizations. And it was hard to tell which one this one was really talking about. So you had to kind of figure that out. Then there was a ton of questions about exactly what are my options, what do I need to do? And this is all about coming from not just the container makers or the publishers of a container image's concerns, but these are also things that people have questions about from consumers, people that are using other people's images that might suddenly go away. And unfortunately, those people didn't get the email. So their images they're using, the publisher of those images may decide to not pay for it and just let the images get deleted. I actually have a couple of my clients that are like that have some older stuff that is in orgs that they know is used, but not very much, and they're probably just going to let it go away. By the way, hello everyone in chat. I know you all are here. Hello Eric and Eric. We got 2 Erics in the room. Sabin's back. Subdehep. I need to get better at pronouncing that name. Subdahip. Close, maybe. You're back. This is like multiple times you've been here. That's great. Nuno's here. Dr. Captain in the room. Hello, hello. We were just chatting in DMs about all this stuff. This morning, Docker had a meeting with the captains to help clarify and help us communicate some of the confusion and to give feedback. We gave lots of feedback, and it's generally nice to be in the captain's program because you do get to give a lot of feedback. I mean, there are lots of opportunities. We didn't, unfortunately, have the opportunity on this one to give feedback before it was launched, and Docker knows it, and they are sorry, and they are going to make apologies. All right. Aditya, what's up? Dan's here. Yeah, so Dan, next week, birthday show. In fact, Docker's going to be here next week, and Matt's going to be with me, hopefully. Docker's going to be here next week to help reduce some of this confusion as well and answer any more questions. But Docker's birthday, official 10th birthday, is on Monday. So technically, we could have made next week's show a Docker birthday show, which I wanted to do. But so ironic. So we're going to have to like do a birthday thing anyway because we're going to have Docker people on there. The topic won't be about the birthday. Not that a birthday is really worth an hour-long conversation. So Matt, how did you find out about this Docker change?
I found out because I guess through Twitter, because I don't know if, well, I also found out through my colleagues because right now I'm in Toronto because all of us gathered together, the entire 7-person company gathered together at our office in downtown Toronto, and my 2 co-founders, they created a product called Kitematic, and long ago, and so they were hired by Docker, or they were acquired by Docker, and so they're kind of in the Docker, the in the know, and yet I mean they were also surprised, so I've been hearing a little bit about it through conversations just in the office, but also I'm in a bunch of Slacks with other evangelists, but also other people in technology, and they've been talking about it, and been a lot of confusion about, well, what does this mean? And if I go away, what happens to my repo, and all the questions that we're all seeing in Twitter. So that's probably most of my knowledge has come from the Twitter thread, and your Twitter thread just now was probably the most informative of all of them.
Well, I was shooting for that. I'm going to put this in there for people just to start digesting it as they're watching. Oops. I just posted this minutes ago because it was pretty long. I don't know, it's like 20 tweets or something. And this is me trying to get out the Twitter thread of the FAQ, the updated FAQ, the meeting we had with Docker, trying to get my questions out of the way because I had questions. Dan's got great questions. These are the kind of questions. How do I know if I'm using an image that will be removed? That's a great question. The answer is you don't. Think of it this way. Anyone that produces an image that is in this tweet. I'm just going to read this tweet first off because it's the shortest I could make this statement. If you have a Docker Hub organization that isn't marked as a Docker-sponsored open source or Docker-verified publisher or an official image, right? Because official images are run by Docker, right? So it's not something that you can't make your own official image, right? Docker has to work with you on that and partner with you on that. If your hub org is not one of those two things, and you want it to exist after April 14th, one member of the org needs to upgrade the org or the organization to a Docker team plan, which has a minimum cost of $300 a year. I think it's like $25 a month. So there are still free accounts. There are still free personal accounts. You can still put all the open source you want in a personal account for free. You can still have, like I do, a paid pro plan for a personal account. It's $5 a month, and none of that stuff has changed. What's changed now is I'm trying to find this. Okay, the pricing page. What's changed now is that there was this hidden little thing in the middle here that was never actually shown on the pricing page. That was, if you made an account, you could create a free organization, just like you created a free GitHub organization or a free Quay organization. But you can no longer do that. In fact, if you're logged in and you go to create an organization, there used to be 3 options. Now there are 2. They're only paid. So Docker is sunsetting the free org plan. At the same time that they've announced the sunsetting of that plan or the removal of that plan option, all existing free orgs have 30 days to deal with it. I really wish they would have given us 6 months, but they're not. So we're getting 30 days, and this will affect you if you have one of these orgs. The way you know if it's you, if you have an org, is if you go to so many tabs. I probably moved it from this screen. Okay, if you go to the, it's all in the Twitter thread. If you go to the orgs page on Docker Hub and you see any orgs that you're in that say Docker free team, that won't exist in a month. So you either need to upgrade the team. You have lots of options, and so that's what this whole show is going to be about. You have lots of options to deal with that. Some of them involve paying money. Some of them don't. Some of them involve moving off of Hub. Some of them don't. So we got to figure that out for everyone. So we've got we've got at least 2 captains here today in chat. James is here. What's up? Eric's here. Actually, we got 3, I think. We got Nuno here as well. So hopefully if I say anything incorrect from the call we had this morning with Docker, which went on for at least an hour, I think, hopefully I'll get all this correct. And if not, that's why we have next week's show with Docker staff, management on board to clear anything up. And of course, if I say anything, because this is kind of an important video for everyone, I feel like if I say anything wrong, we find out later that I said something wrong, I will put it down below in the description. So if you're watching this after the fact, look in the description for any corrections that I need to make. Because Docker may change decisions based on a lot of this feedback they're getting. They may change strategies or change dates or do something. I don't know. So they're also working on a blog post, which I don't have in front of me yet. Yeah, I haven't heard yet. We're just gonna have to refresh on the Docker blog page because they're going to be right now. The only FAQ we have is a PDF file, which they have been updating. But I felt like I summarized most of that in my tweets. Can I not find this PDF? I do not. Oh, here it is. So this is an FAQ. By the way, all this is in the description of the YouTube video. So these links, all these important links that I'm sharing are down there. I think I updated it with my Twitter thread, and that will be also where I add more tweets as this thing evolves, and hopefully it'll become, rather than fear, uncertainty, and doubt, hopefully that Twitter thread will be a form of peace and tranquility and understanding going forward. Matt, do you have any questions that I can answer before I start just diving in?
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I mean, there's this $300 figure that I've seen a few times mentioned, but you look at the team pricing page and it's $9 a month, and I don't know how many months need to equal $300. I mean, how does nine times 12 equals 300?
Yeah, there's
or that's a different thing, entity.
Yeah. I was confused about that as well. So the cheapest you can
what's
get.
the difference between a team and an org?
Exactly. Yeah, these are great questions because I had these problems too. I mean, yeah, James called me the original captain. Not technically an accurate statement, but he called me the original captain and said, if the original captain can't figure it out, how's a regular person? So yes, Docker has admitted that there is better wording and UI UX that needs to go on there on Hub, and they're putting the people on it as we speak. Like on the call, they were looking at what I was talking about, like the fact that some of the information here is slightly different than what I see when I go click on an org and I say upgrade, and look at that. Oh, so yeah, so current plan, I'm on free for this org only. Mm-hmm. It's on a free plan, and if I upgrade this team, even though it says team, it really means org. It's the team plan for this org and this org only. I can pay a minimum of 9 seats. It doesn't really say it here because it says it over here though, that you can get away with 5 users essentially for a discount of at $25 a month, which will then equal $300 a year. So $300 a year if you do it. It's $9 a month if you pay monthly. It is $5 a month, I think, if you pay yearly. So that's what I think is confusing about this, is they're not, because it says build annually starting at $300. Basically, it's 5 user minimum, which is part of my challenge. A lot of open source challenges.
$9 a month and $300 a year.
What's that?
I'd rather pay $9 a month than $300 a year if it's one person. It's confusing.
It's very confusing, and that's the problem here. Is there's a lot of complexity to these plans in terms of how what are users, what are orgs, what is a team. It feels like I'm paying for a team when I pay for this, but I'm not. I'm actually paying for the org to be upgraded to the plan called team. There is no such thing as a team in Hub. There are users, there are orgs, and there are groups. I think I'm getting that right. So, are you trying not to laugh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I should say, Docker is saying reach out. If you have questions, if you have concerns, reach out on, if you have an org, you can support Docker. Like it's go into Docker Hub, click on the drop down, and go to contact support. They're probably having to triple the phone lines or whatever. Not that they have phones, but like the email lines to manage the influx. And they're getting also a bunch of people requesting access to the open source program, which we'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, inside an organization though, you can have groups. Is it groups? No, it's called teams. So yet another confusion, because this set of teams is not the team that I'm paying for when I do this. Like I'm not literally upgrading a team, I'm actually upgrading an org. But they know these complaints we were talking about this morning. Hopefully they're going to spend some serious time on it. This is why you have focus groups and you get outside feedback. So when I do this is the cheapest I can do it. If I want this org to exist with its open source free software, I have to do this and pay $300 a year or $25 a month, even if I'm only one person. That's the minimum I can do. The next option, if I want to keep this org around, is the Docker-sponsored open source program, which a lot of people do. Now, let's back up. What types of images are there on Docker Hub? There are the official images that we all know and love, and those are marked on Hub as official. So if I search Nginx, you can see here there's 3 types of what's called trusted content. So the official images that we all know and love, the way that you know that's an official image is in the URL of the repo, there will be an underscore. It's kind of hard to see here on my screen. But there's an underscore after the .com. That means it's a root image. There is no org name. There is no username. It is just a root image and a special namespace, essentially, in the registry that Docker puts in official images. There's around 200 of them. The way they get there, they have a process, but to me it's a mystery because I've never done it. That process, like not we can't. None of us can just go do that, right? They do have docs in the Docker Hub. In the docs.docker.com. They do talk about official images and some of the details and process behind that. Michael Irwin from Docker's in chat, so he'll hopefully keep me straight and clarify anything I'm confusing. Sabin's saying, $45 a month, 5 user minimum. So yeah, if you pay per year, you get it down to $5 a user for.
Okay.
So, all right. So if you apply for this Docker sponsored open source program, DSOS, DOS. I don't know how we say that. Docker sponsored open source program.
If I saw that abbreviation, I'd think it's some sort of variation on distributed denial of service. No, wait, no, that's
right.
It.
Yeah. Distributed service. Yeah. They call it here DSOS. So this is not new. This has been around for years. And this is the path for a lot of us that make open source that's not for commercial use, that we're just giving it away. This is and we're not going to be an official. Yeah, we're going to get into that. I'm going to put my lawyer hat on. So this is the path for many of us. Now, in the past, there have been problems with this program. People are saying that they've never heard anything after years, months or years. Docker is saying they're ramping this up. They're going to fix this problem. And of course, as of today or yesterday, they're getting a mass influx of requests to be in this program. They actually consider this a superset or a superior program once you're accepted to then just creating a free org. They actually do more stuff for you. They give you more. They basically don't limit any rate. They don't rate limit anything for you in this program, even though you're not paying. And so they're essentially sponsoring your open source by allowing unlimited pulls, unlimited pushes, and as far as I know, unlimited repos. The challenge with this has been, you fill it out and then you hear nothing, right? So part of my tweet thread was that anything you do with Docker as of today that is involving your organization, if you submit a support ticket, if you apply for this program, if you apply for this program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, if you do anything that you're engaging with them in an official way, they will put a pause on that org being deleted until whatever matter is resolved. I don't know for a fact, but possibly if you want to resolve it, but you need 60 days to deal with it, put in that support request, and hopefully they'll extend it. And it sounds like they're going to deal with this on a case-by-case basis so that they don't end up hurting a bunch of legit open source or legit use repos, right? I would not go into forums or tweet them or randomly reach out to them on GitHub. Go through the official support requests under the help menu. That's, to me, the only way I would trust getting a reliable response. What was your question?
So can you say I need 60 days and then have a reminder every 30 days to put in another support ticket, thereby extending it forever?
Only if you do it with Chatbot and GitHub Actions. You need ChatGPT-4 and GitHub Actions. If you do it that way, then it trips a magic robot on their side. No, this is not true.
Excellent. No.
The Docker.com pricing page has different pricing for team tier, monthly, $11 a month. That's because, Eric, you're using a Safari browser and they charge more for Macs. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. There's enough confusion here that I'm going to have to make some jokes. So stay with us. Don't take me too seriously, but take all this seriously, because the next big question, and we're still trying to answer.
Monthly.
Is that monthly?
Yeah, that's if you switch over to monthly, it is $11 a month. If you switch over to annual, it'll end up being $9 if you split up the 12 months into 12 months.
Yeah. So there's something special about, I don't quite understand, but they when I was on the call with Docker, they wanted to highlight that there's something special about the minimum 5 users is $25. Now I'm confused by this, and I don't actually know if that means 5 users for $25 if I bill annually, or is that also a possibility with monthly bill? I don't know. Maybe
so if you
maybe we
switch
can
to
get that
monthly,
answered.
it's billed annually for 420. And if you switch to annual, it's billed wait, what? It's billed annually no matter what.
No. No.
Whether
Oh,
billed
build.
annually.
Maybe it's just
If you
saying
choose monthly.
if you choose monthly, the total for your year will be 420. Usually, when you switch to month, you don't see the word annual in the the buyout. So,
Yeah. No.
you know, if there's
Yeah.
if there ends up being a Docker UX person watching this, that is very confusing. There, like it's like a pro tip. It's like doing
Over
the
the
math
course
for
of an
you.
entire year, you will pay 420. That makes
Yeah,
sense, but
yeah.
it's
But that's
not
not how
billed one
it is
time.
confusing. So I have not clicked this button yet, but I do have organizations that I am concerned about. So I'm going to have to come up with my own plan for my organization. Now, going back to a previous question, Eric's like, I was told there would not be math. I was told there would be a math quiz today. Please put container D, Phoenix. All right, sure, container D. I don't know what you're talking about. Come back at us with a better question. Why use Docker Hub? I need hardening container image repository like Iron Bank Platform 1. Okay. Then if you need Iron Bank, there you go. Use Iron Bank. Like I know plenty of people that use Harbor. But those are, I mean, Iron Bank, like I just can't go use it myself, right? I can't put my images in there. I don't believe I can create an account on Iron Bank. That's like a government Iron Bank Platform 1 is like a government image registry with a bunch of strict standards on what goes in there and what's allowed to be in there.
So
All right.
actually, this is worth mentioning. This is not where it's all the things that happened yesterday and today and all the kerfuffle is purely about Docker Hub and not Docker Desktop or all. That was last year's kerfuffle, last year's big drama.
Right.
This
Well, yeah,
year's
that was
drama
2 years
is all
ago.
about
Yeah,
Docker Hub.
that was 2 years ago. I don't
Was it
remember
2
which
years?
was.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to bring up old. Like, why are you bringing up old
Right.
shit? I'm not trying to bring up old drama, but yeah, we've had the rate limit challenge, and then there was the Docker Desktop paid challenge, and I don't want to go past beyond that. There's a lot of old stuff, but
And so
I mean,
if
every
you want to
company,
continue using Docker Desktop and you are covered by the open source communities that Personal gets you, or you want to use Docker, and or your org, your company is less than 250 people, you can still use that free plan for Docker Desktop and then just publish your images to GCR, GitHub, to all the other
sure.
container repositories.
And none of this has anything to do with your personal account, your user individual account on Docker Hub. Like I have tons of images in my Docker Hub, all open source, and they're fine. They're not affected by this. I don't put any of my images for like my courses and my demos. None of those go into an org, right? So those are not impacted by this. And the orgs I have, in fact, here's one of the things that you can do. Docker, if you want to move from one of these free orgs to a personal plan for that org, maybe you just had the org there because you didn't want them in your personal URL or whatever. But if you want to move that org to a personal plan, again, Docker's strategy here wasn't actually to like remove a bunch of images and save bandwidth. That was not, they told us on the phone, that was not their motivation. They were trying to curb abuse, not legitimate use. And evidently there was, I didn't know this, but there was a way to use the previous org free plan to somehow get like unlimited public and private repos or something. I wasn't even aware of that, but that was a flaw of the original design, and they shorted up by getting rid of paid orgs. But here's the thing, like I can go into my free repo that's open source here, and I can go into collaborators, add more people to have rights to this, and effectively it's the same. It's almost the same as what you would get for a small team or an open source project. No rate limits, anything like that. So that is one of the options. If you look at my tweet thread, there's an option there that says go and into Hub and, wherever I had one of these 1,000 tabs, go into the help, submit a support request, say, I'd like to move my org to a personal account, and Docker will help you do that. That is something they just told us today. So that wasn't in the FAQ yesterday, as far as I know. So that's a way out. Like, that's a way to stick around with Hub.
But one thing I heard with that, somebody on Twitter had talked about doing that, but then, but of course, then you have to share your credentials. But you're saying, no, you can give a collaborator access to your personal account?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing too. I was like, oh boy, I don't want us to share a bunch of passwords around just, I mean, we kind of all do that with bot accounts anyway, but, they're typically, the bot accounts are typically having their passwords stored in a central repo that the whole team has access to, and not Git repo, but like a 1Password or LastPass or Vault or something. But yeah, no, you can actually add collaborators to a regular old personal repo.
And you could call your personal account whatever your open source project is.
Right.
Is there a downside to doing that?
Yeah. So what I don't know is when Docker helps you move it, if because orgs and users have different web pages, but technically the poll isn't different. So like the web page URL would be different probably because it would change from an R to a U. There's actually, if you go into like a public repository that's let's do supported or sponsored OSS. So these are organizations that are getting support from Docker. They went through that DSOS application. They got labeled. So like in Linux Server, a lot of people love Linux Server. None of these are at risk. These are all sticking around. They are not a part of this change because they're not using a free org plan. I got to be careful not to say the word team. So you notice this logo. I wish this said DSOS or it linked you to something that indicated, so I've given that feedback. Hopefully they'll improve that. But it says sponsored OSS. Wasn't really sure what that meant. Wasn't sure if that meant that they were on Patreon or they were taking GitHub subscriptions. I wasn't really sure. But this is actually the DSOS program. You can't do anything with it. You can't click on it. But that is what that means. If I look at that, if that URL up there at the top, there's a /r in there, which means an org. This is just nerd level stuff at this point. But when I pull it, right, I do a Docker pull Linux server /nginx. If another organization like one of mine, let me look at one of mine that is a viable candidate for maybe some of this, is like I work with a local organization, makes complete open source, no commercial interest, not making a profit, not trying to make a profit, not going for a startup. And if I go to repos, a lot of them are very old. And let's say I go in here, this is in, it's technically, if I go to the public view, if I'd pull this, it would be pull code for HR /OK candidate -platform. If I move this to, the way I understand it, if Docker helps me move this to a new user account, it will be the same pull. It will just be a user. This URL will change from an R to a U, but technically the website page will change. And I don't know if they're doing redirects or what they're doing. And there's a lot of little details I don't know about yet. I probably need to see one actually move to really grok the whole sitch. But the idea there is, yes, that's an option. You can do
the reason why you need their help to do that is there can only be one code for HR.
No, probably that's part of it. But the reason we were told in the meeting is they simply don't have that in the UI. There is no way to migrate org to user in the UX experience. So they're going to have to do it on the back end. But yeah, you're probably right. Like you couldn't have both, and you can't move a repo. Yeah. So
if the pull is going to be the same thing for an org versus a user, then yeah, I mean,
if all the tags still exist, like what's the difference? Yeah, like I think there are two groups here that we're really trying to serve. I mean, like when I think of this problem, I think there's the people that are making open source and they're putting it on Hub as a way for people to find it. And then there's the consumers of open source. And this way, if you migrate this from an org to a user, it changes the URL and some behaviors and maybe some of your passwords and stuff for the creators, but for the users, hopefully nothing changes. Again, I would want to test it. I mean, I would love for. We'll probably answer a lot of that on the show next week. Like once we get Docker on the show and we confirm these kind of little details and nuances. I didn't know. Maybe this has been a feature all along. I didn't know that you could request and support to switch an org to a user and vice versa. I've never had that happen to me or any of my constituents, any of my fans. They've never told me they did that. So, all right.
We learned yesterday that you have fans. That you have like diehard fans.
I do. Oh, that's right. So we did our high fivers yesterday, which you can sign up for high fivers over there, or you can subscribe to this channel and you can become a high fiver. And we have a monthly hangout, and we were talking about someone that made a fan site of me, so which is very nice, but a little weird. But hey, I get it. Like we all have. I'm super fans of some people too. It happens. All right, I'm looking through the chat real quick just to make sure we're. That's a heck of a cascading effect on Docker Hub. Yeah, I think that the blowback here is that there are a lot of we're seeing a small but what feels like a significant amount of projects that are planning their move off of Hub. I think they want to move to the GitHub Container Registry or Quay, whichever way you want to say it. Quay.io, which is Red Hat. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of other. I mean, technically, AWS technically has a free one, but I don't really see projects using theirs. I personally put everything I do on Hub as well as GitHub Container Registry. One of the challenges with Quay and GitHub is I know for a fact that Quay's API limits are very low and frustrating, even on a paid plan, even on an enterprise paid plan. Last I checked, which was like a year and a half ago. Like we would deploy a Helm chart with 20 containers in it. We would hit rate limits and have to do. It would have like image pull denies. So it was nuts. It had like a 60-second turnaround, so it was pretty fast. But it was weird when you were watching things come up because it was like image pull back off, image pull back off, image pull back off, and it turns out they had some support document somewhere that said, yeah, we do that, even when you pay us lots of money. So Docker Hub doesn't have any of that if you pay. I mean, anyway, and we don't know those numbers evidently for GitHub Container Registry. So it seems like it's unlimited and unfettered for open source. We just don't know for a fact. That's all I know for now on those. Michael's like, show the fan site.
Those three, those three trusted categories. There's the one that's when you looked at Docker Hub and you did a search, is there any implied support from Docker to people who are using those images? There's no Docker's not saying we guarantee that this is going to work.
No,
they're
not at all.
Saying,
yeah.
I mean, if you have any problems, you still need to go to whoever built the image.
Yeah, correct. So the Docker sponsored open source program is essentially because they're considering it sort of a superset of creating a free org. This is the route for most people that are doing true open source software. If you are making vendor software, commercial software, and you want to, I don't believe this is free. I do believe you have to be a paid business. I do believe you have to pay Docker. But one way to guarantee your image authenticity and they list some information here about trust and whatnot, so that you're sure that you're getting the actual images from the company that claims that they're building that software. That's the Docker Verified Publisher program. So when you look, wherever that, let me go. There we go. Yeah. So that's the Docker. That's the Verified Publisher program. So this will be things like Microsoft. Bitnami stuff is put on there, right? So Ubuntu is on there because Ubuntu has more than just the Ubuntu image. They have other ones in there underneath their org. This is not a path for people for free hosting, I don't think. I think that I could be wrong, but my assumption is these companies are paying Docker I might be wrong. I actually should just not state that, because I actually haven't asked that question, and I've never done a verified program myself. Michael might be able to answer us in chat, but if we don't get an answer to that, I'll try to answer that next week. So that's, and then
I mean, I think of companies like, well, I mean, like Datadog. I mean, Datadog's a commercial company. They sell a service, but the agent is 100% open source, and for if you're using Docker, that agent is a Docker image that is on GitHub or on Docker Hub. I don't know if, I mean, it's been a long time since I worked for Datadog, but are they paying to keep that on Docker? I don't know. I mean, and because it's open source, does it qualify even though they make money?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And then
Eric,
one of the examples that came up in the Alex Ellis blog post was around curl, I think, and because the person who writes curl does consulting, does that mean his curl related images don't qualify? I think that was one of the points in the article.
That is, yeah. And currently his images are, as far as we know, when I started to correlate all this information together, Justin, CTO of Docker, did confirm that those images are fine. They're a part of the open source, Docker-sponsored open source program. There are definitely some sort of legalese questions around like open source that you can somehow pay for. Maybe you pay for support like Rancher, but you don't actually pay for the software. So one of the things we do know is Docker in their FAQ did say that as of September 2022, the Docker-sponsored open source program basically changed their rules and loosened it up a little bit, or allowed more use cases scenarios that were maybe previously denied. So if you're out there and you make open source, definitely reapply. They're saying basically reapply again. They've got more people following the process, so that it shouldn't take very long, unlike evidently before it was very, very long, if ever. And they're accepting more people that maybe were previously denied. So if, I would say everyone who has open source in an org that they want other people to use, even if you somehow think it's somehow related to paid software that you or your company or you as an individual has, resubmit. I mean, in my opinion, make Docker do the work. Make Docker decide whether or not they're going to support you or not. Don't just assume that they're not, because you might be surprised. I don't know. I haven't done any of this, so I haven't submitted any, so I haven't even read the new exact policy on what changed in September and what use cases are now available that weren't before. I haven't looked at all that. So we should mention this, by the way. Alex Ellis is the one that kind of sounded the alarm on Twitter yesterday, so thank you, Alex. He has what I think is a very solid article that came out very early yesterday, like within hours of this announcement, in my opinion. There are now maybe some things in here that are incorrect because we now have new information, or maybe there was some confusion at first. There was a lot of unknowns because the FAQ was not fully fleshed out. So some of this stuff, basically, there's a lot going on here in his article. He talks about a lot of different things. The cyber squatting thing is not an issue. We've now verified that can't happen. If you leave Hub or you let your stuff get deleted, Docker Hub basically, I guess, forever will reserve that URL so that no one can squat your org name and be a bad actor. He gives you alternatives. He talks about tools and options for you to get off if you want to. So I think it's a pretty helpful article. I would probably not depend on it anymore. My attempt with the tweet thread was between that and reading the FAQ. You have enough information to act by dealing with Docker directly rather than relying on what are now already outdated blog articles. And, Alex is pretty good at putting out information. I don't know if he's going to update this or how often he's going to update it. I don't know if he's as passionate about getting the latest information as I am. So while this article was very helpful yesterday to sounding the alarm, I would probably no longer reference it as fact, because a lot of it was him just saying, I don't know, we're not sure, we don't have answers. And we have a lot of those answers now. So thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. I'm not in any way knocking this article, but I think we're now finally getting to it. So something else that's happened is that there's a repo for Docker Hub called the Hub Feedback repo, and this was maybe the comment you were saying. There's like the curl project. One of the things that happened is, this is me speculating, but you get these emails even if you're a member of just one org that's free. And because the emails don't specify which org is suspect, and the email itself, the FAQ now clarifies this, but the email itself didn't tell you how to determine which of them really is the one that it's really talking about. I think some people that are already in the sponsored open source program, again, speculation, but like in this case with the curl images, I think Badger might have gotten the email, but it was for a free org that he might have, as well as not related to the one that's already sponsored and protected by Docker. So this, for users, what are we saying here? For users of images that aren't official images, that aren't sponsored images, like we can all see now if we go back. Man, why do I have such a hard time finding that? Okay, here we go back here. For you, if you're using images that aren't labeled as one of these three, and it's not in a /u, so you know it's a user account, then there is a risk in a month that image will go away. It's really going to have to be up to you to find the org owners and ask them if they intend to pay. The reality here is that anyone who makes a repo in Docker Hub, just like in GitHub, they can delete it at any time, right? What we're talking about here is that they might be on vacation, they might be simply unable to pay, but they don't have any knowledge they didn't watch the show, so they didn't know there was all these other options, so they don't move it, they just let it expire. Maybe they move it to Quay or GitHub Container Registry, and you don't know that they did that. Some people, a lot of people like me, maybe some, maybe not a lot, we put our images in multiple places because things go down, like GitHub's Container Registry goes down. So I put it in multiple places so that people are taking my courses and using my stuff. If push comes to shove, they need an image, and like right this second, there's another container registry that they can go find it on. That's really why I do that. And there's no API limits that we're aware of on GitHub. So if you suffer from the Docker Hub API limits that we all learned about a couple years ago, if you suffer from that because maybe you're in an org that has a single firewalled IP and you've got hundreds of developers all using that same public IP address to go to Docker Hub, and you're not authenticating and paying, because you have to get unlimited pulls, you have to be on a paid plan even for your proxy IP. If you're not doing that, then you probably are someone who's already dealt with this. Like you're already moving all your images somewhere else, and you're using images from somewhere else because the rate limiting probably got you to leave at that point. I just went and basically made all of my systems were authenticating to Docker as me. So I went into all anyone who was using Kubernetes, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whenever it was when the rate limiting went into effect, we all just made sure that our Docker pulls were authenticated with a pro plan account, the $5 a month account, and then we had unlimited pulls. So, which is pretty great, like unlimited bandwidth for $5 a month. So, a machine account technically would be what that was called. All right, let's look at some more questions.
And
I'm sure we were.
One thing I keep seeing, both in the chat as well as on, everywhere I've seen discussions about this, it's like, oh, well, just use Podman or just use Kolima or just use all these other Rancher desktop. Well, that's not really the problem, right? I guess with those, you're probably publishing by default to a different registry, or are you? Or do you publish by default to Docker Hub no matter what, and you have to change it over to something else? So Podman or Kolima, those are neat projects, but it's not a reaction to this particular problem.
Yeah, like Andy Wilson just posted. You might be responding to a different question specifically, or our previous conversation about API limits. Wouldn't it be just as easy to set up a pull-through registry? If you're talking about the API limits, yes. That's, in fact, Docker's official recommendation for that strategy. Is like, if you're in a company, get a pull-through registry, cache your stuff, but even at the end of the day, the pull-through registry, it's a little tricky because that pull-through registry is still going to want to ping metadata to see whether or not images are like, do you have the latest? Do you have the latest? Stuff like that. So there's a little nuance in how some of those things work, and you can still trip up. You can still hit the API limits if you're not careful. So pull-through registries, caches, essentially like proxies, a fancy version of a web proxy. Those are recommended on any org because you just really save a lot of bandwidth across your organization if you don't have to pull the image 5 times a minute because you have 150 developers all working on PHP or Python. Like, it saves you a lot of bandwidth and time anyway.
I mean, I've kind of been wondering about setting something like that on my Docker desktop, setting up some sort of pull-through registry, just so that I can have that local cache. Because sometimes I want to play around with something when I'm on a plane and I don't have that connection. So a question about that: is there a tool that lets me do that will pull from and cache the Docker Hub and GCR and GHCR, or is it just to one registry?
Well, that is Docker, right? Like, any container runtime does have an image cache built in. So you pull those images; they're all available on your machine. You don't need a registry for that.
Of course, I didn't think that.
Yeah. But it's a good point. If you have servers, like if you're running a bunch of VMs, like let's say you want to run a 3-node Kubernetes cluster,
right? Yeah.
If you decide to run that inside of K3D or in Podman or whatever,
okay,
then in those cases, depending on how you set up that cluster, it may not use the Docker or the container runtime's existing pull-through cache,
right.
Or not pull-through cache, sorry, image cache. That's the distinction on Docker Desktop. Docker Desktop, the advantage of running Kubernetes on top of Docker Desktop is that Kubernetes is using the Docker daemon underneath as its runtime, and it uses the Docker daemon's image cache as its image cache. So there's technically a benefit there.
But if I'm using K3S on a bunch of VMs on parallels on my Mac, it's not going to know anything about that.
Yeah, then that's when you need the registry pull-through cache. Yeah, for sure. And Docker has a blog article actually on how to set that up. And they probably put it in their docs by now. But when that whole API thing happened, a lot of us wanted caches to begin with, and we just never needed them because Docker just gave us everything. And Docker sort of made us all do what I would consider the responsible thing, especially for organizations, of turning on a cache, pull-through cache. All right, so I think I'll skip some questions. I'm scrolling back through. Sorry if I missed anyone. If it's been 5 minutes and I haven't answered your question, feel free to put the same question in chat. I won't be offended. Eric's pointing out, by the way, an image that will be deleted, purple doobie / goof, is an image I don't care about, but there's nothing on the public page alerting users. Yeah. So as far as I can tell, when this announcement came out yesterday, this is another one of the goofs from Docker, there was no change in any notification or indication on the hub in the UI. So there's no way that you're yet that your org is going away in a month. I don't know for a fact, but I'm betting that will change in the next 30 days so that people or you or someone will know. Like, it just makes complete sense to me that if you're on a free org and they're not buying it, they're not buying yet, right? But it's still there for another 30 days. Wouldn't it be nice if all of us users went to their page and it actually said, this org is scheduled for deletion in 20 days. You might lose access to these images. Like, that would be super cool.
And
but
even
I don't
better,
know if they're going to do that.
having somewhere for the author of that image to be able to say, now go to GCR or now go to another registry.
Yeah, they'd have to go in and update their README. Yeah. You have to go. Well, and that's the problem is after the 30 days.
All information getting deleted.
Yeah. Well, the org
30 days.
My assumption is the org web page on Docker Hub will get a 404. That's my assumption. Like, there won't be like some placeholder or like an empty org with no repos. I'm assuming, because most of us don't go to an org page. We usually go to a repository page that's inside of an org. My guess is that page won't exist anymore either because technically the org doesn't exist. Yeah. Okay, Michael Irwin's confirming a couple of things. One, the Verified Partner Program is a company that a paid product for companies to get from Docker. So they're paying Docker for the privilege of being a verified publisher. Companies like Oracle, Ubuntu, these are the companies that are doing that. Individuals like us are probably not going to do that program,
Right.
especially if we're all doing open source. Like, to me, those are programs maybe for more closed source or quasi open source or open core or whatever you want to call it, companies. All right, let's keep going because I think I don't want to get too far behind these questions. Safari browsers, Michael Irwin. Does anyone remember that? Remember that was a scandal with some online retailer or something 5 or so years ago? Was that they were caught? It's like a bigger company, big realtor. They were caught with different pricing based on the browser. People were seeing different pricing,
Oh my
couldn't
God.
figure out why, and they basically figured out that if you were coming from a Mac, they identified that and changed and showed different pricing. I don't remember what that was from, but
Wow.
yeah, super shady. But yeah, airline pricing. Kareem, thank you. That's that's exactly what it is. Airline pricing. Depending on how you get to the pricing page, you get preferred pricing or not. Yep. Andy, I have not used GPT-4 yet. I watched the demo and I'm excited about it, but it's been a hell of a week, so I haven't had a time to check that out. I'm probably honestly, I think you have to pay for it right now. I think in order to get GPT-4, I thought you had to pay for it. Isn't that true?
You have to pay the $20 a month.
Yeah. Okay. So I have so much of this AI. Like, I use Notion, I use Neva Search. All these things are building it in for me. So I'm actually just going to probably just wait until they update their stuff to I'm assuming they're all using GPT 3.x or whatever. So I know of people that like they sit with it in their browser and they do stuff in it all day. But I have Copilot in GitHub and VS Code. I have Copilot for anything I do in Markdown. I was having Copilot write me a bash script last night, and it was spot on 99% of the time. It knew. It's like it could read all the files in my repo, so it knew when I asked it for an array of 3 different names, it knew the 3 names I wanted. They weren't in the file. I don't know how it figured that out. So Copilot in VS Code from GitHub is getting great. So I don't really know if I need GPT-4.
I was using GPT-4 last night. Because there's this problem I know I've had for a little while, and I keep meaning to write the script to do it. But I thought, well, let me just try this out. Create a Lua script to use with Hammerspoon on my Mac that detects when my ATEM Mini is online, then automatically mounts the drive on the ATEM. And it wrote out the script, and I mean, I don't have I'm not at home, but it looks like it will totally work.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty.
Hammerspoon is an amazing automation tool.
I haven't tried it yet. That is pretty cool. I did see a friend ask it, I need what can I use in GitHub to automatically merge my main branch updates into my PRs? And GPT-4 spit back a GitHub action to do that.
Wow.
I mean, such a
another
time
one
saver.
I did yesterday was create a fish shell function to delete all the lines in the SSH known host file that specify the host used in the last SSH command when it says, oh, the fingerprint is wrong because it's a new host at that IP address. And it came up with the fish shell function that does exactly that. And it's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah,
anyway,
awesome.
Not Docker related.
No, it's okay. We all have our passions. So Bitnami, Zolt's asking, Bitnami images, I think he's already responded, basically saying, I use Bitnami images. Those all look safe. Those all look like verified publisher images, which means Bitnami's paying Docker for billions of downloads, right? 1 billion, 1 billion, 1 billion. 12 billion, 12.9 billion for kube control.
And so Bitnami is part of VMware. I mean, Bitnami used to be separate, but now it's part of VMware.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't actually know that they're.
I don't know.
I don't. I can only keep track of the Docker acquisitions. I can't keep track of VMware and Google and everyone else's. I only have a few companies that I pay attention to that stuff, like Udemy, because I have my courses there. I pay attention to theirs. Um, yeah. These are all good good chat. Everyone, thank you so much in chat. People are answering questions. Um,
And one person, Sabine, said people use Artifactory for this, which I assume is JFrog Artifactory. And is that as a pull-through registry, or what is? I don't know what Artifactory actually does.
yeah, it's like the equivalent of GitHub packages, only it does even more than that. It's sort of a one-stop shop for container registry, npm registry, storage package system, Ruby gems. It'll scan stuff for security. You can put regular files in it, and I'm probably only listing like a quarter of the features of it. It does a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of enterprises I know have JFrog, and they use it for pull-through caching. In fact, I seem to remember like when the pull-through caching thing all started happening, JFrog was like the first company that announced with Docker that they were basically supporting, like if you were using JFrog as your pull-through cache, they automatically do all this for Docker images, and like Docker was partnering with them on something. It was on the blog, but it was like JFrog was on top of it. They made sure that the API rate limiting wouldn't affect their customers, and they worked. I'm assuming they worked closely with Docker on that. Oh, Bing is built on GPT-4s too? Yeah, that would make sense since they put billions into it. So, hey, all right. We got a super sticker. Thanks, Sadaip. I appreciate it. Another super sticker. You're great. Thanks for hanging around. Copilot is amazing. I absolutely agree. I'm lucky enough to have enough popular repos on GitHub that they just sent me an email to gift me Copilot. At this point, I probably would pay for it, even though I'm not a full-time programmer, because I use it. I use VS Code for Markdown, Docker files, all my infrastructure is code, and it's just as useful there as it is for an actual developer. Yeah, and I think I've written like 3 shell
Eric
scripts in the last week with it.
Eric corrected you. It's Doby, not Doobie.
Yeah.
As in Doberman. As in Scott.
Yeah. And then 7 was like, "Don't ruin it, Eric." Yeah. Doby. Everything in the kitchen sink, but it's built in Java, which makes me cry. Yeah, it is a beast. And if you're running your own registry, now you're just a storage manager. You're basically running a very complicated storage management system. I say very complicated just because it's not like running a file server. Like you have to run the web servers. You have to manage their resources. You have to make sure they're backed by the storage, and obviously the registries all now, like your self-hosted ones, they support S3 and all sorts of object storage as well as flat file storage and there's a lot of options there, but I don't ever want to do it. Like, I don't. If I was going to do it, I would have to do something like Artifactory, GitHub Enterprise, which would support it, stuff like that. All right, what other questions did anyone have? I mean, this whole show today kind of got the topics were supposed to be about the courses, but I'm happy to talk more about the Docker Hub stuff. I'm going to go through my tabs real quick and see if there's anything else. I pulled up basically everything I could think of that we would talk about on this topic.
I mean, I think of what. So when it seems like there are potential solutions for people who are paying attention to this right now. Whether it's moving to a personal org and having added collaborators to that personal org, or moving moving to a different registry. But I guess the other thing I'm also thinking about is what happens for the person who is just getting online or just graduating or in school now or in school in 5 years, and they're looking at the huge number of Medium posts or DigitalOcean posts that talk about here's how to get started on Docker that's not too old, but a little bit older, and they reference these images that a lot of them just don't exist at URLs that just don't exist.
It's possible. I'll be honest though, I don't think that's an issue. because
Yeah.
well, it is pretty rare to me. I mean, like Docker said, there's only 2% of all their accounts. There are millions, tens and tens of millions, if not, I don't know. I don't. Do they have 100 million accounts? I don't know what their actual user account is. But they said only 2% of accounts had a free org that they were members of. So that number could still be huge. It could still be in the tens of thousands. But I can't think of a scenario where I've seen a demo where it was like the demos I see, they're either official repos by far, most of those are official repos, or they're using a DSOS or a verified publisher image, or if the person made images themselves that you use in that demo, like I do for a lot of my demos, their images, they're in my user, and that's not affected. They're not in some org that I made. They're in my user.
Right.
So I think a lot of what's coming down to it is some of these, some quite popular open source projects that do have commercial interests that may not include being able to get into the DSOS. And I've seen some like some that are like Kubernetes CNIs, networking plugins for Kubernetes. I've seen them already start discussions about moving off of Docker Hub, which is interesting because it's like a paid company, it's a profitable company, or what we say a for-profit company. I'm not sure if they're profitable. A for-profit company that's essentially riding on the back of Docker Hub free. And I agree that they shouldn't be able to do that. Like if you're making commercial products, you should probably, like, Docker is within their right to ask you for money. I wish they gave you 6 months to do it.
Especially since it's not, I mean, if you're a commercial entity and you are bringing in funds, whether you're profitable or not,
right?
I mean, it is not a huge amount of money that they're asking for a company.
Yeah.
And it might be a large amount of money for an individual, depending on where they live in the world. But for a company, I mean, that's a pretty low cost compared to what you're already paying for your, all the MacBooks in your office or the other computers in your office. And I mean, and this is,
I mean, if we look at this equivalent to like old school, like before open source, when we were all downloading .exes, companies were paying big dollars to hosting companies to host their downloadable files. And when they would release a new version, we would all be struggling with that crappy file hoster that they chose that was cheap and couldn't handle the bandwidth. And what Docker Hub is like now, essentially it's the modern software house that is providing a ton of it for free. So yeah, I'm not questioning the decision. Docker's apologizing and trying to figure out their messaging for how to apologize to the lack of proper communication. I would argue that 30 days is not enough time, especially for maybe some of the older stuff. But we're really probably talking about a very small amount of accounts. Small as in, like, I'm going to say hundreds to a few thousand maybe. That's just complete freaking guess on my part. So there's one thing that I did, and this is this is a little bit nerdy. And then I'm going to read through my tweet just so that we actually have that in the audio version for this to go into a podcast form. But I went through. So this is an interesting phenomenon. So if you go into the Hub feedback, now granted, so of all the people using Docker Hub in the world, only 2% of those actually got this email. Of that many, only so many are like aware of this, or maybe there's consumers that didn't get the email, but they're consuming this stuff and they're on Hacker News and they're paying attention to Twitter. So those people, we're all at the tip of the spear, right? Now we're talking about the people that are listening to us on this. These are the tip of the spear people. They're staying on current knowledge, like on the day of, the second day of. Very, there's not been a blog post. There's not been a Docker newsletter yet. There's not been. I haven't seen the headlines from the Register and all these other places that will surely make headlines about this. But one of the things I did is they're on the Docker Hub repo. I'm sorry, the Hub feedback repo. What you can start to see is what projects are making GitHub issues. What open source projects are making GitHub issues that are referring to this GitHub issue as a reason for them to make a change. So as you start to scroll through it, there's now 56 comments. And as you scroll through, it's almost all comments until you get to today, because this all happened late on the East Coast. It was in the mid-afternoon yesterday when this happened. But as you start to get down, you start to notice people referencing this in other projects. A vast majority, basically, and it's almost like you can watch this ledger of people figuring out what they're going to need to do. Right? Are they going to bail on Docker Hub, find something else? Are they trying to wait on new information? Are they just bringing it up to have a discussion here in the next few weeks? All those things are happening, and I poked into some of these. The vast majority of these are small projects that I've never heard of with a very small user base. Not that they're not important to those users, but it's not like we're talking about big worldwide images here. There are a few that I kind of scrolled through and I saw this, Project Calico, like that's the CNI I was talking about, Tigera having some stuff, talking about switching to Quay. So there is definitely fallout. Docker knows that. They're going to hopefully do some mea culpas and try to bring back some of the people that were dealing with the FUD or not handling the FUD well. But a Grafana Helm charts. What's funny is a lot of these are related to rate limit. Like this one's about rate limit, but they probably are mentioning this. I went into 3 or 4 of these where I found that people were having conversations in GitHub issues on their project about the rate limiting stuff years ago. The issue never got resolved essentially because they did nothing. Like they just kind of talked about it and they didn't make a decision to leave. They just left it open for discussion. And then, years later, it's still there. And now people are coming into those issues saying, well, we've got another Docker Hub problem now. Our org might be deleted. What are we going to do about that in addition to the API limits? But yeah, a lot of these I was looking through and I clicked on some of them to kind of, I would click on one kind of like, okay, what is this? 47 stars, push images to a different registry. Not it's technically open source, but not depended on by the industry. And so I definitely want to be accurate in my communications and say that like this is a big deal. There's some blast radius going on here, but this is not like sky is falling, I don't think.
No.
Like this one's got 2.7, so that's pretty good. Implications of Docker changes. So it's a discussion. Their plan is to move to GHCR. So yeah, there's people figuring it out pretty quickly. But again, these are all tip of the spear people. Like if they're less than 24 hours after the announcement already making decisions to change where they store their software, these are going to be small projects in my opinion. Like this takes longer.
Yeah.
And granted, if you're you should probably take a moment and step back. You've got 30 days. Wait for Docker to put out a blog post, put out a PR, like something, a press release. I think the email was it was unfortunately so badly worded that it was hard to even figure out what was happening. So people jumped on the bandwagon. Hacker News is not a nice place right now for Docker. If you're a Docker Hub fan on Hacker News, but that's normal for tip of the spear. That's what Hacker News is, and most people don't hang out there and make their decisions based on Hacker News post, I guess. Anyway, let me read through the tweet real quick, and then we'll take some more questions. So I just want to get this on record for the podcast. So this is what I said. I've got a lot of ums today. I'm just going to apologize for a lot of ums in my speech. I find them annoying as well when I have to listen to myself. All right. Based on a meeting with Docker today, if you have a Docker Hub organization that isn't marked as a Docker-sponsored open source or a Docker-verified publisher, and you want that organization to exist after April 14th, one member of your team needs to upgrade that organization to a Docker team plan that will cost you a minimum of $300 a year. If you submit a support ticket to move your organization repos to a personal account, you can do that on Docker Hub, and they will help you do that. You can also apply for the Docker-sponsored open source program, which will put a hold on your organization until they make that decision. And if you're approved, you're great. You're golden. You have even more than you had before. You have more support from Docker, unlimited bandwidth. If you are denied that through the DSOS, then the counter resets and you have another 30 days after that denial to do something with your account. You can also pay and apply for the Docker Verified Publisher program if you're a commercial software vendor, which is a way out of this problem. Any support request or application for those two programs will put a hold on the organization to avoid its deletion, and the counter will restart after the issue is resolved, essentially. If you have applied to the Docker-sponsored open source program to get your open source on Hub for free, and it's been denied in the past, reapply. They are reconsidering all options now. If your org is deleted in 30 days, no one can squat on that URL and use it for bad purposes. They can't pretend to be you. That URL is evidently no longer used. It's kind of like my Xbox username. Decades ago, I created one, and I forgot the password. So I made a new one, asked them if they could get me into the old one. They said, nope, they're forever frozen. Even though you've deleted the account, we've deleted the account. We never let you reuse that. I don't know if that's true anymore, but I just remember that because I was really upset I couldn't get my original Xbox Live name back from there. There's an example here on screen of what it looks like when you're looking at a repo that is sponsored open source. So you get a special little logo, a little tag there. No Docker official images, known as DOI in the biz, no Docker official images or personal account images are at risk, nor are the previously mentioned DSOS or DVP organizations. It's only those organizations, basically organizations, anything with the /r/ in their URL, only those organizations that are still on a free team plan are subject to this issue. This affects all images in that free team org, both private and public, which was a confusing thing in the email and the FAQ originally, because the FAQ mentioned private specifically, but it never said public. If you are storing an image on a paid org or personal free or paid plan that was built from an image that gets deleted, this is a really tricky one, your image will still work. This is always true. This has always been true on Hub. And this is the way that registries work. When they do garbage cleanup, they don't delete old layers of an image if other images refer to those layers. So because you can imagine we would break the entire internet if someone deleted an image out of anger. So if someone left, copy left kind of situation, if that was the issue I was thinking about. And then we're all depending on those layers for our images that we built from that image. Those layers still exist. Docker Hub will not delete layers if they're referred to from other layers on the same registry. This is not true across registries. If you store your built image on Quay and it depends on a from image from Hub, let me think about that actually. That actually will still be legit because those layers will have to have been copied over to Quay, I think. Why am I not thinking? Someone in chat's probably going to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But basically, this is the complex scenario of how registries work. So what you can't do is rebuild your image. So if I depend on, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones organization / Nginx, and they have their own custom Nginx repo in a free org at the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones org. If I build an image from that and store it on Hub, my image, that version I've previously built, is saved after that org gets deleted because the layers are in the registry. The registry knows my image depends on them, and the registry will not delete them because of that dependency. If I try to rebuild my image, however, and it has that from line in it, that from line is going to go try to find the Mighty Mighty Boss Tone / Nginx image. It will not exist, and my build will fail. So new builds from missing images will not work. But it won't break production systems. It won't break any existing apps that have been built before the deadline. You're affected by this if you go to hub.docker.com/orgs and you see anything listed there that's marked Docker free team subscriptions. I wish they would make that really obvious to people, and maybe they will in the next month, but right now there's no other way to know other than looking at that orgs page, and like I'm going to do here, you'll see that I have a whole bunch that say Docker free team. Those are all going to be gone in a month unless I do something. And then lastly, when in doubt, submit a hub support request to hub.docker.com/support/contact, because they will either they might give you good news, they might give you bad news, but at least they will. Their goal is to not delete your org while your support requests are still in flight, like while you're still dealing with them. All right. How long did that take? An hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Matt, have I answered all your questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one that seemed to have the biggest concern out of all the on posts was about, okay, if we leave Docker Hub, is somebody going to take my place and put something bad here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's you've said, in your thread, you mentioned that no one can take over that, and I think that was probably one of the biggest concerns, because all sorts of bad people out there. But
that's just a cool thing in general on Docker Hub. I don't know if that's true of all things on Docker Hub, but that is actually a cool thing. Like, it's a shame that there will never be able to be another company called Mighty Mighty Boss Stones, but it's cool. We need that for supply chain security, in my opinion, on all of them, like just all of them. It's not ephemeral. It's what's the other word? It's it can't change. Whatever that word.
Yeah,
I'm tired today.
And I look forward to when Docker finally posts some sort of blog, or even on their news or anything official on their website that says, here's what happened, and here's what. I mean, you have to go to this PDF that apparently is linked in an email that some people got. But everything else is based on hearsay about, nobody has
fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Immutable. That's what I was trying to say. Immutable.
Yeah.
Not really the best word to use for that, but immutable org and usernames in. That's not really the right word, but basically, because I want to be able to change my username or something, and then it changes my stuff, but I don't want someone else to take it. And I've seen this happen on GitHub, by the way.
It's like in Active Directory. I mean, I don't know if Active Directory is still the same way, but when I was at Microsoft, Active Directory was just coming out. And if whatever the attributes are, you decide you don't want to use that anymore, you tombstone it, and it can never get overwritten, or, I mean, that.
Look at
you can still change it when it's still in use.
That is some wicked.
Back to my days
I was a big AD guy, so tombstoning. That was the thing.
When I was at Microsoft, we would often, I was working for state and local government for state of Washington, Oregon. We'd often go down to state of Washington government offices, bring Stuart Kwan, who is one of the AD kind of architects, to talk to them, and it was early days of Active Directory.
Pseudo B Mitch is saying, another Docker captain, saying that when you do a from, and when you're pushing your image from your build machine to another registry, it effectively copies the layers of the source to your repo on that other registry. Which, I figured it wouldn't be able to point you to other registries.
But there's going to be, as a user of one of these open source repos, there's no way for you to know if the tool that you rely on is going to disappear. Let's say it's April 15th, that tomorrow my thing disappears. Because I was thinking one thing you could do, if you knew, you could create a new image that has a from that thing that's going to disappear tomorrow, and then base all your new images off of your one that you just created, which is going to stay around forever.
Yeah. Well, So like, if you're relying on an org that doesn't have any special marking on it, if you're relying on an image from an org, you probably need a better plan at this point. like in general. Like you probably, I mean, so like
Yeah.
the teams I work with, they do this by default, right? The big teams that got their stuff together,
Hmm.
they don't rely on like any image they're going to put into production is on their registry in addition. Like it might be on Hub, but
Yeah.
they're going to copy it using Reg Client or some other tool. I see you sudo Reg Client or some other tool to clone or copy that entire all the layers, all the metadata to another registry for what they need, because their goal is Hub might go down, GitHub Container Registry might go down. If our
Right.
registry goes down, it's our fault at least, and we have people that are going to monitor it, and the big teams they're going to run it. These are the people that would put Harbor in AWS and manage it themselves on a redundant cluster, and they trust that more than they trust the public ones. So they are already protected in production. They could continue to deploy production. The question is just if they completely lose that source code, hopefully they know where that source code came from. Like somewhere, if it's open source on GitHub, on Docker Hub, hopefully they know where it's coming from on GitHub. They can go grab that open source, build their own, push it to their own registry, right? Or store it in their own Docker Hub accounts or whatever. So I feel like this, the more we talk about this, the more I feel like the blast radius is smaller than I originally even thought this morning when I got up.
And somebody who has an image that people rely on, that or some small set of users rely on, who doesn't want to go through the effort of moving to a different registry or changing their account type or to whatever, are they also the type of developer that might not care about, in several of your either high fivers or other calls that we've done, we've talked about some of the extensions in Docker Desktop around looking for vulnerabilities, looking for, is that kind of developer also going to have a lot of the vulnerabilities in there that they just don't want to address? And
there's
I don't know if you can make that correlation.
No, I do, and I mean it's what is the saying? As you do one thing, you do all things. So in this case, if someone's, let's use the word sloppy enough that they're only putting it in one registry, they have no backup plan, everybody's using their open source, and by the way, I'm going to bring up Alex Ellis again in a moment. He is not sloppy in this, but in his blog article, he's definitely not a sloppy guy. Super smart, makes great software, rocking it in open source, trying to make his best life living as an independent open source creator.
Sup?
Yeah, he has a ton of tools. OpenFaaS, OpenFaaS Ketchup it's pronounced ketchup, but K3 Sup. Actuated, which is a pretty cool way to run GitHub action runners. He has a ton of stuff. So I support him on GitHub financially through the sponsors program. And he has a great example, which is his OpenFaaS repo. Technically, people can get paid for support from him. He still pays Docker for a pro plan to store it on Docker Hub. But because it's OpenFaaS, it's big enough of functions as a service solution, and it's got tons of users. It is in its own org on GitHub, and most people that do that, when they put it on an org in GitHub, which in our community that tends to you're trying to do that to encourage community involvement and make it less about you and you being the benevolent dictator, and getting the community involved. And so when you do that historically in GitHub, you would then also do the same thing on Docker Hub. If you made an org on GitHub for your application repos, you would do the same thing on Docker Hub to match for the image downloads. So in his scenario, I think he's got an OpenFaaS, and so OpenFaaS organization on Docker Hub. And the real question is that going to work with the new open source program? Because he can technically get paid for it. He can technically be sponsored for it. He takes money for it, and he wants companies to pay for it. But it's completely open source, free solution. Is one guy enough of a seeking commercial distribution of software? We'll just have to wait and see what Docker Hub, Docker team does with that. And I hope he reapplies if he's already applied. I'm just looking to see if I can't find his stuff, so I can speak factually instead of speculating. it's only mentioned once there. The OpenFaaS project now publishes its free community edition images to GitHub Container Registry, but we still see thousands of pulls of old images from Docker Hub. Docker is holding us hostage here. If we don't pay up, systems will break for many free users. So now that he said that a day ago when he had no information. Now we have the information that, well, he can probably take that organization and move it, put in a support request, have Docker move it to a personal free plan, and he just has to create a new user account, essentially. That's how I understand that process. But the point is that Docker will help him move that stuff over. He could also reapply for that for the community edition. He could reapply for the DSOS. Hopefully he watches this show or learns this information through some other method, because I would love for him to continue offering it in multiple locations. We just had a GitHub Container Registry outage recently. I can't remember when it was. So, I think anyone who's delivering software as big of a deal as Alex's is, it would be nice if it was available on multiple registries. I am not a fan, if you haven't heard me say this already, of Quay. Unless it's changed in the last year, I don't like the interface. I don't like the API limits. I think it's confusing. And granted, they probably changed it now, but the last I checked, it didn't even support like the OCI Helm chart update that all the other registries were supporting. So I'm not a big fan of Quay. It's probably better now, and I probably should just.
Now, one thing where I should probably say something here, because yesterday when Bret talked about Quay, he said Key.
I did.
And because apparently he was corrected by somebody that the correct pronunciation of the word is Key. And yes, if you are talking about English, the key that dock-like thing that sticks out into the water where you get on from a boat, yes, that's a key. You hear it more in England or in the UK than you do in the US. But I remember going to a talk by somebody who worked at CoreOS, which is where Quay came from, and they said, yes, the word is key, but the product name is Quay. Now, I don't know if it's still the official pronunciation is Quay, but now that it's owned by somebody else, maybe they just like, that's stupid. It's key now, or if they even care. But because there's some other products where I pronounce it this way, but I don't care how you pronounce it. Like GIF. I think GIF, the people behind GIF or GIF say, we don't care how you say it.
I've heard Udemy calls it Udemy. Other people call it Udemy. They're fine with that.
Udemy,
Traffic calls it traffic, but some people have called it traffic, which maybe is I don't know if it's traffic. But everyone that I've talked to calls it traffic. That is part of the project.
But the AE isn't like, that's how you spell Caesar, and it's a E sound, so should it be traffic?
Yeah, traffic. Yeah, Andy's saying traffic. But I partner with, it's right here. Everyone I talk to there calls it traffic. Now there might be some Europeans there that pronounce it differently, but all the Americans, the English native speaking people I talk to call it traffic. So because I try to adopt it, like I used to mispronounce Ubuntu as Ubuntu with like a U. People on this show corrected me, and I'm learning English still. Actually, that's not an English word, but so it's good. This is all hard stuff, right? We all learn these names on the internet, and we don't know whether they're made up or they're a different language, or in the case of Quay, it's actually an English word that we just don't use in America because we like loading ramp or loading dock. That's what we call it. I grew up on with a boat, so I feel like I would have heard Quay in America if it was used in the Midwest, but it's not.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Eric says you talked to the founder at their booth at DockerCon, and he said it like traffic. Yeah. So it's cute. It looks cool, It's very cool. And the problem now is that when I say traffic like the normal word, when I spell it, I always mistype it as the company, and I get them. Yeah, I struggle. And for the longest time
Eric's
with the
trying to
Quay
bring us
thing.
into the Quebec.
Oh no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that.
Quebec.
That one is just like whatever you feel like. There is no wrong version. We have now moved into a world where there's no wrong way to say that command. Well, I think we're running out of questions, so you want to wrap this up?
If all we can talk about is the correct pronunciation of Quebec, then we're running out of questions.
Yeah. Let me look. We got we're slightly dipping but holding steady at viewers. So for you all here, we're wrapping this up, but I want you to take away some of the key information. So I'm going to send you again, which all the links below. I'm going to send you my tweet thread, which I will add to if we find out information that I need to correct, or if there's new additional information from people that are asking. I'm going to try to make that I could write 1,000-word blog post, but I don't want to. So I'm really hoping I can keep each one of the individual questions to a tweet answer, and then it becomes a much easier way for me to maintain it, and then I'll just issue corrections below. I don't pay for Twitter anymore, so I can't edit my tweets. And then next week on this show, same time here, we're going to have Docker on the show to basically have this same discussion. Matt and I will be back. I don't know who we're going to have from Docker. It might be Michael. It might be Justin. Who knows? And we'll hear it from the horse's mouth. We'll have this same conversation. We'll cover these same topics. Hopefully we'll have more questions, or maybe there's going to be some changes involved. Maybe they're rethinking some things. I know that they've got a whole bunch of people working on various parts of this miscommunication, including improving the hub UX so that it's less confusing, adding stuff to the FAQ, putting out a blog post. There's a lot going on at Docker headquarters right now. So we're going to have that show next week. And then, like I said, if you're someone who's interested in GitHub Actions and Argo CD, that course starts Monday. So if you are interested at all, I am running a special so that you can get a steep discount from what the price will be, because this is basically the beta cohort, but this class starts Monday. So if you want to get on that action, look below. There's a link in the description. You'll get hundreds of dollars off on that class. And Matt will be there. We're going to be hanging out together there. So that's going to be a fun time. I'm excited for that. And coming up, we've got guests coming, big names soon on the show. We are in the works I'm in like a dozen discussions right now with various companies to have their products on the show. But ones that I know about is we're going to have Michael Cade on with Kasten. That's the K8 storage from Veeam. We're going to have Brendan Burns on from Microsoft, corporate vice president and co-founder of the Kubernetes project. He's going to be on sometime this year. We do not have a date, but probably the first half of this year. We're going to talk about the future of containers. We're going to have Quay on the show next month. So coming up in a couple of weeks, Quay from the Duckbill group. You probably know him from Twitter and YouTube as the snarky guy who basically, he doesn't tweet unless he can snark about it. But he's going to talk, we're hoping to talk about the 17 ways you can run containers in AWS. So he has a really he did a post and then he had to update it because they made more ways. So he's got a series of posts around all the ways to run a container in AWS. There are a lot, way more than I knew. And so we're going to have him on.
My favorite is Code Build.
Code Build?
Yeah. Their build tool that runs a container. It's like free for, I don't know, several hundred minutes a month. That's a pretty cool way of using containers.
Is it just like you point it to a repo and it builds it? I don't know Code Build.
Yeah. That's basically what it does. I did a demo when I was did a talk at reInvent one year where I was live building I was live blogging my session as I was doing my session, and I used Code Build and about 17 to 20 other services from AWS. Had a little camera in the front room taking pictures of every slide, panning off to some AI service to figure out which slide I was on. Injecting I had Gatsby building that website every time with every new image that was posted, along with pulling notes out of my Dynamo database to have some detail, some notes about what I was saying, and then post onto the website. And it worked. It posted things to the website. It was right about 20% of the time, but it was a cool demo.
Yeah. That's pretty fun. That sounds like a lot of work. My favorite is App Runner.
It did not.
I'm going to be. Oh, sorry.
My managers were very concerned because the whole demo did not work until about 12 hours before my session, and I had about 2,500 people in the room for my session.
12 hours? That's plenty of time.
Stressful.
Plenty of time. I think that is maybe I'm not trying to one up you, but I did have one at DockerCon where it was failing 1 hour. It was less than an hour before my talk, and I had a Docker engineer working with me to figure out why it didn't work. It was a Kubernetes demo. It has something to do with like the early days of Docker trying to work on Kubernetes or something, and I needed 2 other people in the room that knew better network troubleshooting skills on the fly for Kubernetes that I had. This is like 2017, I think.
Yeah.
And they got it. We got it figured out. Oh, and I think it was related to running it in AWS. So it was probably like a security group change or something. I think we were trying to figure out why things couldn't communicate.
Yeah.
And it was. I was sweating bullets because I had this big demo reveal, and I wanted to show it on stage actually work. I love real. It's always. So I think it's fun to do the demos where it's at risk and you could screw it up, and just have fun with it. So I like the pressure. I like the pressure when I'm doing it and it's over. I don't really like it all before when you feel like you're not going to make the deadline. All right.
So I think Eric's saying that when Docker Hub builds were free, there were always people using it to mine crypto in their Docker files. And I can't remember if it was you that mentioned this or somebody else I had heard from saying that they were using Docker Hub as a way to host pirated movies.
That wasn't me, but that sounds cool. Like instead of BitTorrent, just use Docker Hub.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is that against? I mean, I guess you're hosting content you don't own, so someone could report you for piracy.
Yeah.
But is that a misuse? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I used to think putting volumes on there was misuse, and I made this little script that would allow you to use it's called Docker Backup, that would allow you to export like a single command that would export volumes and put them in the images, or copy them necessarily in the images, and then store them on Docker Hub. And then Docker themselves went and made it an official extension in Docker Desktop.
Right, yeah.
So they're basically saying we should put volumes backups and storage on Docker Hub. So
yeah,
I haven't looked at the terms of service. I haven't seen whether that's allowed, but it seems like it's allowed. They're letting us do it. So yeah, maybe fair use or of the product. So anyway, everyone come back next week. We're gonna have Docker on the show. It should be fun. They're great people. I enjoy working with them, and it won't be the first time they've been on the show. They're on the show 3-4 times a year. And then we've got all these big names coming up. And of course, if you want to listen to the podcast, audio-only versions of these shows, go below. We're working on more shorts on YouTube for them. We're working on clips on YouTube for them. We're actually starting to put these Q&As. We're working on getting these actual Q&A episodes into the podcast and basically like trim it up and take some of the extra crap out and make it worth listening to it for that long. And so let us know how you like that stuff. And of course, thumbs up if you want to keep having this stuff. And you can become a member of this YouTube channel, which means a lot because it goes for me to pay the team to do all the stuff that Matt and I don't want to do, like scheduling the guests and making the thumbnails and doing all the social marketing and making the podcast edits and making the shorts. Like I have a team that does all that and they need money. So I need to pay them.
Yeah.
And you can do that by being a subscriber here on YouTube. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Internet.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Ciao.
Bye.